and they used to sell balloons at the mall. And you'd buy these balloons for 50 cents, and moms would get them, they'd tie them on the strollers, and the kids would pull. I don't know if they even still do that. And I went through the mall, and I remember looking up, and it was like 40-foot ceilings in the mall. And I started noticing all these balloons that were stuck on the ceiling. Kids had let them go. They had helium in them, they went to the ceiling. So I got this idea. It's like, dude, if I could reclaim those balloons. So the next day, or no, actually probably the next week, I got some kite string from the home. I got some masking tape. And so I had 50 cents by that point, so I bought one balloon. And then I put all the masking tape on the outside, turned it inside out, and I put the kite string on it. And so I started like letting the balloons up, sticking them to the balloons on the ceiling and pulling them back down. So after about 30 or 45 minutes, I had like 5 or 6 balloons. I go to the other end of the mall, and I sell them all for $0.25. So that's awesome. The moms love it. They can buy 2 balloons for both kids. So, but my life is full of those kind of stories, because if I wanted something, I really had to find a way, a creative way.
From the IT company, it's Made Right Here, the stories of East Tennessee founders, creators, and builders. From the idea behind it to the impact it had on the community, their employees, and their personal lives, we're taking you behind the scenes of the movements they built. Hey, this is Paul from the IT company, and welcome back to the Made Right Here podcast. Today, we have Neil Koonce of Healthcare Receivables Group. Neil is a friend and so fun to interview. You're going to learn a ton. There's so much wisdom in here and some fun stuff about just Neil and his work ethic, the creativity he brings into the approach to business from as a kid, figuring out how to take helium balloons stuck to the mall ceiling and sell them to parents, and just the way he approaches his job, the jobs that he had, and really learning from the mistakes that others were making. And it's just a great episode and a great story of a guy who has really given a ton back to our community, and many people don't even know. So look forward to you listening. Enjoy. Neil Koonce. Neil is a customer and a friend, and I guess CEO, president of Healthcare Receivables Group.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
So, thanks for being.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very humbling.
Oh, well, thanks. I think, I don't actually, you grew up in Nashville. So tell me, like Davidson County, Nashville?
Yeah, really? I grew up in a little area called Berry Hill.
Okay.
And we never had to worry about keeping up with the Joneses, because my neighborhood was part of, after the Vietnam War, the Air National Guard, the Army Guard was right there.
Okay.
And they put all the officer housing in these couple of little neighborhoods. Huh. So I like to joke that we were tiny house living before tiny house living was cool. We had a 905 square foot house, 4 of us, one bathroom. But what was funny, we didn't know any different as kids. All our neighbors had the same size house. So it wasn't like, hey, the people down the street have a big house. Yeah. But it was a great environment. It was a great location.
Berry Hill?
Berry Hill is near 100 Oaks Mall back in the day. 100 Oaks, Thompson Lane.
Oh yes.
I-65 area.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was just a little pocket there, and now it's mostly commercial. Recording studios. When I grew up, I had 4 or 5 recording studios.
Really?
Within I could walk out of my front yard and count them. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
So, your parents, tell me about your parents.
Yeah, I had a great childhood. My parents are awesome. My mom just passed away a few years ago. My mom was really part of some of my inspiration to start a business. I think sometimes you don't know what you can do until you see it modeled, or you kind of have a ringside seat. My mom was always entrepreneurial, and she, back in the day, now when I say Franklin, Tennessee, nowadays everybody, Franklin's like this. Well, back in 40 years ago, Franklin was just a little suburb of, but it was really historic. My mom had an antique shop down there
in Franklin.
Yeah,
on the
square.
She drove from Berry Hill.
She drove Franklin Road out there, and it was on the square. She was right next door to the old jail and all the historic stuff down there. But she had an antique shop. She later had a clock shop. So she did she was kind of a pioneer, being a woman and having a business. This would have been 60s? In the mid 70s.
Oh wow,
something like that.
Really?
Yeah, early 70s.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. And what about your dad?
My dad was in sales, and he'd get in his car every day and drive all over Tennessee. And he worked for a company that was a dealer for small engines, so anything that had a small engine on it. And so he would go out and he would call on, not the right word, but like Western Auto, independent lawn, all these kind of lawn equipment companies and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah,
and
hardworking
you
guy.
said 4, so you must have a sibling.
Yeah, I have a sister who still lives in Nashville. She was a year older than me. She had a medical. She actually was out of school for about 3 or 4 months when we were in 2nd grade, and so we ended up in the same grade. So we were 1 year apart.
How cool is that?
Within 4 days. And then we went all the way through the rest of our school days in the same grade. So people thought we were twins.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you must have been pretty close.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Fought like brother and sister.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you're in a house that small, I used to joke you have to go outside to change your mind.
That's awesome.
And I lived outside. I mean, I literally,
the
majority of my time as a kid, I was one of those kids where I only came in when the street lights came on, or my dad said, it's time to come eat or whatever. I roamed the neighborhood with BB guns and riding my bike.
Couldn't do that
all
now.
that. No. But
and
building tree houses.
Can you imagine if somebody was walking down your street with a BB gun?
Yeah. or a pack of 8-year-old boys with
BB
Daisy
guns.
Red Riders.
But we did all the time.
That was awesome. That's where I learned to shoot.
That's really awesome. That's incredible. So I assume it sounds like what you said about your mom. Your parents obviously had a pretty big influence on you.
And really my extended family had a great my wife is an only child, so I kind of feel like I never saw that part of it, but my cousins and aunts and uncles and all that.
Everybody was around?
Fairly close, but what was great is, if it was Labor Day or 4th of July, I have an aunt and uncle who live outside of Nashville, and they had a farm. But so, every Labor Day you had a dove hunt, 4th of July, and there would be, sometimes 30, 40 people at our little gatherings. And so all my cousins and aunts and uncles and all that. So it was a real wholesome kind of way to grow up.
I think about, this is a little diversion here, but growing up in Nashville in Davidson County. Yeah. And then now what Nashville is has got to be just remarkable.
It's I don't even reckon. I told somebody the other day, I was never a race car or NASCAR or whatever it is, but we lived so close to the fairgrounds that whenever they had the races on Saturday night, my room used to be the garage that was converted to a bedroom, and I would have my window cracked in the summer because it'd be so hot, and I could hear the start of the races, how loud it was. And so we were, I would say as the crow flies, we were probably 2 miles from downtown.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, especially kind of what you said about Franklin and the drive on the interstate. It takes an hour now, in the worst part of the day.
That's right. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of folks moving in. One of the most interesting things when you mention that about the geography of Nashville, one of the greatest things my parents ever did for my sister and I when we were growing up, we were zoned, just kind of really because of where we lived, we were zoned for a high school that did not have a great track record for academics or even, staying out of trouble and things like that. And my parents got my sister and I transferred to Overton High School, which was south, out Franklin Road towards Brentwood, kind of out that way. So I went from kind of probably, being zoned for a school where I probably would have gotten in trouble to now ending up in a school where, country music stars' kids were there, and it was just it was a different world. I was the guy that wore the blue jeans and the flannel shirt, and they were the Izod crowd. But it was interesting because I'd never been exposed to that. And it really influenced me. Just some of the friends I had, and going to their homes and realizing everybody doesn't live in a little small house. And so it was eye opening.
What? So I guess you left a bunch of friends. I mean, all your friends from middle school.
But
you went back to them every day when you went home. I
say this tongue in cheek, but most of the guys in my neighborhood I grew up with either were forced to go into the military or they they went away. So what we call it, they got in trouble.
They got in trouble.
Yeah, they'll be back in 24 months or something like that. The greatest thing about my neighborhood, though, is I could walk out my front door, and there were 3 of these parks in Berry Hill. And so we had a basketball court, we had a baseball diamond with a backstop, and we had a big area where we could play football.
Wow.
And then there were swings and all that stuff. So literally, I could, just pick up all the guys in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd play basketball for an hour, and then we'd go play baseball, and then we'd have
Yeah.
a football game.
That's awesome.
It was just great.
Yeah.
Good childhood friends, but everybody, I to this day, I have 0 of those friends that
From your neighborhood?
that I grew up
Really?
with, that I have any contact with or have had any contact
High school
with.
friends?
Yeah, high school
school
friends,
friends,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
But just not
and
the
college
neighborhood
friends,
friends,
but
yeah.
not my neighborhood friends. It's kind of weird. Everybody just kind of...
You said that high school was like this big influence because you went somewhere different. What do you think how do you think that shaped you now looking back? 30, 40 years?
Yeah, probably 40 years ago. Yeah, 40 years ago. I think like most things in life, opportunity is the key.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that talent is pretty evenly distributed amongst most people. Not the same talent, but talent is evenly distributed.
Yeah.
Opportunity is not evenly
Right.
distributed. And so one of the things that was eye-opening for me was, I can remember one of my best friends, I went to his house, and his dad was like an executive with Kroger. And this kid lived 5 miles from me, but they lived in a house that was, probably 6, 7 times bigger than my house. And they had nice cars, and they had this and that. And I began to see, like, what's the potential? How did this guy, why is he in this family, and why is his dad doing something different than the other dads I know in my neighborhood? And what's the difference? And that's not too bad. It's not to draw a comparison. One's better than the other, but I'd never had any contrast.
Right.
Yeah. When you grow up and everything's the same, everybody around you's got the same. It's not as obvious. So I began to, even when I was in high school, I mean, I can remember Pam Tillis was in my class, and her
Really?
dad was Mel Tillis.
Really?
And
The stutter, Mel Tillis. I remember him. Yeah.
So I can remember
know
going
Pam Tillis is too.
going over to their house after football games, and just kind of being this kid from, like, hey, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm from the other side of the tracks.
That's crazy.
But look at how all these kids live.
Yeah.
So it was, in its own way, it was very inspiring and encouraging.
Yeah.
I never looked at it like somehow I had been treated differently or was missing something.
Right.
It was just something to aspire to, and to know, hey, there's other options out here.
That's really cool.
I was the first person to go to college in my family.
Really?
So aunts, uncles, cousins, everything. Now I've got several cousins and others that have graduated, but at the time I was kind of an anomaly.
Wow.
First guy in my neighborhood. All the people I knew, they did not go to school.
Do you think if you hadn't gone to Overton that would be different?
I think so.
Yeah.
And the other thing, people, I'm one of these people where I believe, God has a way of putting people in your life for different seasons. And so, like family members and people like that, your spouse, they're there for a long time. But there are people who come into your life in different times that, for whatever reason, there's a purpose in that. And I was dating a young lady in high school, and she went to Tennessee Tech in Cookville, and so I just kind of followed her up there and thought, hey, this is maybe what I should do. And we broke up pretty quickly after getting up there. But then it encouraged. I had gotten involved, and it encouraged me to stay. And then I met my wife after a couple of years, and she was 2 years ahead of me in school, so she got out. And then of course she was like, "You need to." She was, how wives are. She was encouraging. My wife Jamie has just been, a constant since then in many ways, but her encouragement to, like, yeah, you're going to do this. I was not a good student. I was a natural student. I could remember stuff if it was something I was interested in. These guys that, like, remember football stats. If it was something I was interested in, I never had a problem with it. But to study and to,
I feel you.
And math about kept me from. I went to, of course, engineering school, and math about ate my lunch.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, though, if you listen, I mean, there's some that are the Elon Musks and the Zuckerberg that are just like crazy, brilliant. But I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially as I do the show and listen to them, I don't think that many are like, oh, it was a fantastic straight A,
Right.
valedictorian. I mean, most of them, I think it's the grit and the grind. You know, it's just something different about it.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And you know, when I got to Tennessee Tech, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Kind of had this epiphany as a freshman that you know, I didn't know a lot, but the things that I did figure out were really instrumental in guiding me. and it hit me one day that I don't care what you do, if you're a doctor or a plumber or you know, it doesn't matter. Business is what undergirds everything.
Yeah.
And just like you hear people say accounting is the language of business, I think business is what drives every profession. And so it hit me as like, look, I'd had a lot of success doing business related things, and I thought this is for me. This is what I want to do.
Was there anything in like middle school, high school where you
I
working
was
jobs and stuff?
God, I always, so as you can imagine, and we weren't poor, but my family were, you know, they were pretty frugal, and they decided what they were going to do and were good stewards of their money. And so I never had the fad stuff. You know, everybody at school was wearing the shoes, the tennis shoes. Man, I got the Kmart specials, whatever. But so if I ever wanted anything, I had to work for it. And when I was a kid, one of the stories you'll love this. So we lived near the mall,
right?
And so all our little pack of guys, we'd go over there after school, and we would play air hockey. Yeah. And so they had this place, and they had pinball machines and air hockey. Well, you know, my parents weren't the type to go, here you go, here's a roll of quarters. Hope that lasts you for a while. So I was over there one day with no money, watching all my friends play, and they used to sell balloons at the mall. And you'd buy these balloons for 50 cents, and moms would get them, they'd tie them on the strollers, and the kids would pull them. I don't know if they even still do that. And I walked through the mall, and I remember looking up, and it was like 40-foot ceilings in the mall. And I started noticing all these balloons that were stuck on the ceiling. Kids had let them go. They had helium in them, they went to the ceiling. So I got this idea. I was like, dude, if I could reclaim those balloons. So the next day, or no, actually probably the next week, I got some kite string from the home, and I got some masking tape. And so I had 50 cents by that point, so I bought one balloon. And then I put all the masking tape on the outside, turned it inside out, and I put the kite string on it. And so I started like letting the balloons up, sticking them to the balloons on the ceiling and pulling them back down. So after about 30 or 45 minutes, I had like 5 or 6 balloons. I go to the other end of the mall, and I sell them all for a quarter. So that's awesome. The moms love it. They can buy 2 balloons for both kids. And all that. So, but my life is full of those kind of stories, because if I wanted something, I really had to find a creative way of generating money. When I determined that I was going to marry Jamie, of course I was in college and I didn't have any money, and my roommates and I we started a business and made enough money and bought a diamond ring for my wife. One of my roommates was from Smithville, and in McMinnville near his house, it's the nursery capital of the world. So they grow, and nursery meaning all these plants and all that. And so we would take a trailer down there, and we'd buy all these plants wholesale and bring them back to Cookeville. And then we got into, like, people would say, well, I need you to, you know, install all these things, dig the holes, landscape my yard, do whatever. And so we went from being a kind of a broker for wholesale plants to we started doing all. Wow. So in a matter of 3 months, I earned about $1,500 back in that would have been like 1983 or 84.
That's a lot of money. Probably like 5 or 6 grand. Right?
Yeah, well, I was working as a swim coach, making like $3.60 an hour. So it was $1,500 extra during the summer. Yeah, just to do something. That's it was one of those things where, what else are you going to do? Yeah. I'm not going to rob a bank.
All right. That's
awesome. So we got to find a way to figure it out. Yeah. So it's it's those kind of things I think that cause you to be creative. Yeah. I'm one of those people in business where I've always thought, a lack of money is never really an obstacle or something, but even bigger, the biggest obstacle you have is a lack of an idea. Yeah. You can always find ways to support great ideas. Yeah. And when I look back on my life, I did a lot of projects, things I learned from. Yeah.
Did you're talking about going to school, so you go to this high school that sounds like it's probably more wealthy.
Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and you don't have that. So did
No.
you ever feel was it anything
not
where it was
really.
like, and did anybody ever even act like it was a?
No, I mean, I wasn't I wasn't Mr. Overton or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was probably a nondescript kind of student. I had some,
What you knew
had some
Pam
great,
Tillis.
yeah, I had some great friends and played basketball with Buster Brown. His dad was Jim Ed Brown. I mean, we had all, anyway. So
That's awesome.
and back then they just went to. I probably had 5 or 6 country music stars kids in my high school
Really?
that were just good kids,
They
just
never know the
regular
difference.
kids. Yeah.
Huh.
And some of the other people in my high school, their parents were as affluent or more than the country music
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
They just
yeah.
weren't as well known.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I never. I don't think I knew enough. I was too naive.
Yeah.
You know, now as an adult, I probably would have felt really like, hey, I don't belong here. What's up with this?
Yeah.
But back then, I was kind of naive and just thought, hey,
Huh.
people judge you for who you are,
Yeah.
not for what
That's
you're
That's
driving,
a
and
great perspective.
what you're
though.
wearing.
Yeah.
Although they were being judged for what they wore, what they were driving.
You just didn't know.
That's right. I didn't know any better.
What was you talked a little bit about Tennessee Tech, and that's where you obviously met your
Yeah.
wife, but what was that overall experience like?
It was good. I like to joke that I crammed 4 years into 5. It did take me a little while longer to get out. And
Was she real that the girl was like, that was the inspiration for it? It wasn't like, I could go here, but...
Yeah, there's more to it than that. It was convenient because she was going up there. But my mom worked at Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt had a tuition program. So if you were an employee of Vanderbilt, your child could go to school anywhere in the state of Tennessee up to the tuition for Vanderbilt University. So what I had to do is I had to take some tests and stuff, and I think at the time, Vandy and maybe Swanee or somewhere were the most expensive schools, and so it was good for my parents because my school was paid for. Of course, they housing and things like that they helped with.
Right.
And were very supportive. But I think that alone. So I owe Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was very gracious,
pretty awesome.
and up until recently, they still offered that. I think now it's partial.
Wow.
But what a great perk,
Yeah.
particularly for someone like my folks who were like, hey, we don't have to worry about, even back in that day, I was probably spending $2,000 or $3,000 a year on college.
Huh.
So that was helpful.
Something that strikes me, the two things that you've now talked about that come back to a word you mentioned is just opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think about just there's all this some of the work that we do in the city, that you do and that I do, like that's the biggest barrier for a lot of kids is that they don't have access to the opportunities, to people who can give them opportunities. But like those are two big deals. Like that you just said, one is going to Overton and two is your mom working at Vandy.
Right.
And having that opportunity to go to school like that, that's a big deal.
When you look back over your life and you think of all that, probably should be dead, probably should have gone to jail, probably should have, whatever it is. But when you also look back and you go, man, what a break.
Yeah.
What a break. And that certainly was one of those things. When I got to Tennessee Tech, some of my friends from, and I was always kind of this way. I was never the franchise guy that just bought into what existed. I was always the guy that I believe we can make something that's better than that. And so when I got to Tennessee Tech, there's 8,000 or 10,000 students, and I started a fraternity.
You started a fraternity?
So with
rather than joining a fraternity.
Yeah. So with some other guys, and so we were a charter for a year, and then so for it's the Pi Kappa Alpha down, and so there's 47 names on the charter of the fraternity, and mine's one of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so we went through this whole period where we had to go through the national fraternity, and
why?
I know
what's the background like? Why not just join Sigma Chi?
I like the guys. Yeah, right. There were some good. There were some good fraternities. There were some other guys that were like me that were like, hey, I think we're different than these guys.
Huh, interesting.
And we have other guys that are like us, and we have other guys that aren't like us. Let's put it all together and think we'll have a pretty good group. It was a lot of work, but I tell especially young people, fraternities get bad raps, and some of it is due.
Yeah.
At Tennessee Tech, the interfraternity council there was kind of Mayberry-ish. Nobody, the things you read about in the paper and at other big universities and stuff, we didn't do all that stuff. So what I learned though was about starting something from scratch and building something, and then having a group of guys that you have to have you can't have 20 of them wanting to go this way, 30 of them wanting to go this way. The camaraderie that was part of that and building it was some of those friendships to this day are some of the greatest friendships I have. Still keep in touch with those guys.
I'm just trying to comprehend this. Like, hey, it's Rush. Let's just do our own. So what does that look like? There's no internet. Like, how do you?
Well, there were some guys. There were about 20 guys who had already kind of come to this conclusion.
Okay.
So we joined with them, and then we continued to recruit other people until we got to I think we had to have 40 or something to start. I think there's maybe about 47 of us on the charter.
How do you choose, like, we're going to do, SIG up or
there was a chapter advisor who had been, and there was also a guy who was a graduate assistant who had been a pike at another university.
Got it. Okay.
And so he had gotten the ear of these guys.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it was just all. It was like today. It's kind of networking.
That's crazy.
We didn't pick it out of a magazine. Yeah, these guys sound.
Well, you can't. There's no Google. There's no like.
That's right.
How do I start a fraternity?
If it had been, Alpha Beta Chi, it doesn't matter. We were going to build the culture for that fraternity. Cool. So
did you get a house?
Yeah, we had a house. We had everything. It was awesome.
That's incredible. That's a startup. That's kind of like a startup franchise.
I learned more about it, and I was an officer and did all those kind of things. And we were our national. You'll love this. Our national symbol was a fire truck. And so I remember one night, Sunday night, we were having our chapter meeting, and somebody said, "Hey, my dad knows a guy in Nashville, in Franklin actually, who has this old fire truck. It's like a 1967. It runs, and the guy wants like $1,800 for it." And we literally raised the money that night, passed the hat, and people wrote checks. We emptied bank accounts and shook out pigs and everything else, and we bought this fire truck, and then we would take the fire truck to the football game.
That's awesome.
We were the new guys in town, and
That's
we were
incredible.
hanging off the fire truck and doing the parades.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. What was you said you were an officer. What were you?
Yeah.
All of them at one point?
At one point. I don't think I was ever the treasurer.
Okay.
But
president?
All the other stuff. Actually, I think I was the vice president.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. I don't know if I was. I don't think I was ever the president.
That's a great. I mean, between starting up and also being in leadership, it's a great experience.
Absolutely. And you have budgets. You have.
Yeah.
I mean, you have. You can sanction other brothers for things. I mean, we have a judicial committee, and I mean, you have to put all this structure in place. It's not just, hey, let's just show up.
Yeah, it's not like Revenge of the Nerds or
something
like that, where it's a big party all the time in a house.
And you can imagine, university is going to be, they're going to have very tight control over any on-campus organization like that.
Was your house on campus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah,
that's great. How do you get a house on campus? How does that work?
Well, I say on campus, you just went to the edge of our street. Yeah. You went to the end of our street, and that's the first building. Okay. I assume we were within the property. The university did not own our house.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, we
rented
incredible.
It. What a great story. Yeah. So I do.
That's my life in general.
Well, I do want to know
one thing after another.
How you met Jamie? Were you hanging off the side of the fire truck?
Yeah,
she's like, I want that guy.
Yeah, we went to homecoming together. That was our first date, and then she was a little sister. I mean, we had little sisters and the whole deal. Yeah, so we started dating there. She was from Chattanooga and grown up in Chattanooga, and she was a big deal in her sorority. So she had gained a lot of good experience there. She was on the. We both were. I was on the interfraternity council, and she was part of all the sorority stuff and everything. So it was just a good experience. I'd never done any of that kind of stuff before.
Yeah,
it was neat. But yeah, it was kind of love at first sight.
Really?
So, yeah.
For you or for her?
I'd have to ask her. I don't know about for me. I was probably just some.
You were smitten.
Yeah. I was lucky to to find someone.
So
like
you
her.
met her because of your fraternity and sorority work,
and
whatever that's called.
Being
Okay.
on campus, we'd have mixers and stuff like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was neat, and even I'm thinking back now. It's funny, I was flooding back, but like, Big Brothers Big Sisters was our national philanthropy. So
really,
our friends right down the street, one of your employees is very involved there,
Yep.
and but Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so we did one of the first big jobs I had with the fraternity was to do this giant on-campus fundraising thing that we brought all the fraternities and sororities together for these competitions and all this kind of stuff. And it was, the organization and all of it was probably why it took me 5 years to get out of school.
That's incredible.
But it was good, practical experience, and I think experiential learning is key to life. So I was still it was a jump start for me.
Side note: she's not on campus, but Macy is she has a little.
Yes, I do have
Big
one.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
great.
I love it.
So
Yeah,
she's
it's
involved.
awesome.
Cody's involved.
I guess they're looking for a new director now.
Yeah,
though.
Brent moved to
Mhm.
Washington,
Yeah.
Washington State, I think, or something like
Yep,
that.
yep.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So Jamie, what?
She was a couple years ahead of me in school, and she got out of school. She had a really successful career. She was a retail buyer. So when she first came to Knoxville, she was working for Miller's,
Yeah.
the old Miller's
I
store. She was
remember,
right down on Gay Street.
Yeah.
The World's Fair was going on in 1982,
Yeah.
and so she was, right out of college.
Did she
working
move
at-
here and you were in Tennessee?
Yeah, I was still in Cookeville.
Okay.
She moved here and lived over off Paper Mill. So we had a commuting relationship for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And but she bought for Miller's, and then we moved for a short time and went to Louisville, Kentucky, and then she never was ever unemployed. She was really good at what she did, and she loved traveling. She'd go to New York for market and all that kind of stuff. And when our kids were young, we just kind of made the decision that she was going to stay home and do those things. And I'd like to say we could afford to do it, but at the time we weren't sure. But it was a big decision, and she was a great mom. And
that's awesome.
I think our kids were certainly better because of it.
So what kind of degree did she get? Like a merchandising
She got
degree or something like that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And yours is
yeah.
yours
Mine
is
is
degree?
marketing and management,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so walk me through. She's here. You're graduating.
Yeah.
Was it like I'm gonna move to Knoxville, or you had a
Yeah,
job
pretty
pointed
much. She'd
somewhere else?
already had a couple, 2.5, 3 years of
Yeah.
work experience, at least 2.5. And so she was establishing her career. And here I am, getting right out of school. And so it was, hey, I'll just come to Knoxville. It's as good as anywhere.
What were you thinking about doing?
Wasn't really sure.
Just
I mean,
find
honestly,
a job with the business degree or a marketing degree.
And I interviewed with a company based out of Brentwood, and it was they were a healthcare related company, very similar to what we do now.
Okay.
And you talk about another gift in life. Man, I joined this company. I was 23 years old. We had 45 employees, and that was the only other job I've had besides my own businesses. And so from 23 to 30, I worked for this company, and we went from 45 to 450 employees. And
wow.
So we had an office here in Knoxville, but they were based in Brentwood, and I had a super boss, a guy that was just a really I don't know, encouraging, because he there's a lot of accountability, but he was an inspiring guy, and he taught me the basics of business.
Yeah.
And that was I probably haven't given my boys great advice, but one of the things I told my older son when he was graduating is he was looking at all these, hey, this is a startup, and I said, look, work is really not about hanging out at a coffee shop on your laptop 2 hours a day, worrying about what the price is for Bitcoin or something.
Yeah.
What you need is to go to work somewhere where you can learn the fundamentals of business, blocking and tackling. Yeah. Be in an organization where you don't get your way. Be in an organization where you come up at night and you're mad about bureaucracy, and you're trying to figure out a way to serve your clients better, and you're being there, and there's constraints, and you got to think about how to get around all that kind of stuff. And that was part of working there, going from 45 to 450. And so I learned, man, it was like drinking from a fire hose.
And it was the whole revenue cycle.
Yeah, it was all revenue cycle stuff. They were really some innovators and some stuff they were doing, and we became one of the biggest players in the market. And then they sold.
Wow.
And I knew at that point,
you didn't want to do that again.
as
far as working for somebody else.
There were 6 shareholders. They were all about 15 to 20 years older than me. And I was probably number 8 on that list. And so I got a pat on the back.
Oh,
they all
man.
got some pretty big checks.
Yeah.
But I look back, Paul, I got more than, I wasn't looking for a payday, but what I got out of that was some just great experience.
Yeah, like an MBA.
Yeah, and I tell people this sometimes too, when they get frustrated with their jobs. Sometimes what you learn from a business that you work for is not necessarily how to do things right, but you look at the mistakes and say, I'm never going to repeat that. I'm not going to treat people that way.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And so it was a gift, and it was good fuel for me when I started my own company.
I had a lot of influences for me in sports, and it's funny you say that. I think the same thing. Like I've probably learned more from my bad coaches than I ever learned from my great coaches. And I learned a lot from my great coaches.
Sure.
But like I learned a lot from the ones that didn't do it right.
That's right.
Like I don't ever want to be that way. I don't ever want to coach or lead in that way. So
people model whether it's good or bad, and people are looking at them.
Yeah. My friend told me early on, raising kids, to remember that more is caught than is taught. Yeah. And I think that's true about just business too. Like they're gonna people. You can say whatever you want to say, but if you don't walk that out, then they're not gonna do it.
People want to be led. Mm-hmm. People want to be led. I've discovered that as I get more gray hairs. People show up every day, and they just kind of, if left sometime, not out of intelligence, not out of intent, not out of anything, but they just kind of roam aimlessly unless you've got to be the rudder on the ship that keeps things going. Yeah. One of my favorite old sayings was, a guy said, if you want to build a ship, you don't start by going out and chopping down a bunch of trees and having people draw up the plans. First thing you do is give the group a yearning for the sea.
That's good.
And that's what it's about. You got to get people, if people are excited and people know where you're going and people are behind what you're about and they understand the why of what you're doing, dude, you get out of their way. Yeah. They're going to run you over.
Yeah, that's really
You're not going to have to drag them along.
Yeah. I'm re-inspired.
Yeah.
Hey, before we transition too much into work, you wrote some things down about just big influences. I'd love to walk through those individually for just a minute and hear kind of your story. You list your wife first. You may have already covered it, but what is it about Jamie that's really influenced and inspired you?
I think everybody needs somebody in their life that speaks truth to them. It's not always welcomed, and I think when you have a title or a certain amount of success or other things in life that might cause you to think you're a big deal, you need somebody that says you're not a big deal. Yeah. And here's what you have to remember. And so that's one thing I appreciate about her is that she keeps me grounded. Number 2, she's always just been very supportive. She basically gave up a career for me to pursue the things that I have pursued. Yeah. And so, I wake up and I'm, 20, 30 years down the road, and I think of all the things that consume my time. And she wakes up and kids are out of the house and she's like, what have I gotten out of this? Yeah. And hopefully her life has been enriched by both of us being successful. But she's my partner, man. We've been 36 years in November. That's awesome. 36 years. And so she's been through all the ups and downs. One of my hardest things I try to do, and you know this in business, man, it's feast or famine. There are days where you just want to, somebody's talking you off the ledge. The next day you're on top of the world. And nothing can stop you. And I've always tried to, when I come home at night, to not put her through the same ups and downs that I've experienced throughout the day. Now, I can't say I've always done that. She knows when things are bad. She knows when there are challenges. But it's not fair to her for me to come home and drag all that stuff in. And but she's a champ. She loves the same things I love. We're different in a lot of ways. Yeah. People say that about opposites. We're not. I mean, we're very different in the things that we enjoy. But there is no doubt in my mind I would have had achieved any amount of success that I've had without her.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Doug Sager. That's
Yeah.
pastor.
He was
Doug
he was my
Sager
pastor for 20 years.
Concord Baptist,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Doug said, and Doug and I were not, we were not the kind of people where we'd go to lunch once a month or anything like that. But during my formative years, Doug was just incredible as a person who just spoke truth and was just a wise man who, and from my faith perspective, I came to faith when I was 26 years old. So the first 26 years of my life, man, I was just running hard in whatever direction I thought.
I did not know that.
Self-sufficiency will kill you.
Yeah.
And that was my drug. I tell
Was
people.
Jamie ahead of you, behind you, or?
Oh, she had come to faith when she was a little girl.
Okay.
She was part of my story. Yeah, she didn't give up on me. But that was one of those things where my life just changed. I mean, all of a sudden, I went from kind of just being on this treadmill, having the weight of the world on my back, thinking, boy, if I'm ever going to be anything or have anything or achieve any level of success, it's going to be because of me. And all that changed. I had such a peace. My life just gained sach purpose at that point. Yeah. And that's really when I hit my stride, man. And so during that time, I came to faith. Doug Sager came to our church just a few years after that, about 3 or 4 years after that. And so for 20 years, I sat under his teachings and all that, and he was just somebody that was... Neat. Isn't it funny, though, how you can have a relationship with somebody like that? And I say those things. I didn't eat lunch with Doug once a month. I didn't even really... Yeah. But when he was retiring, I was in a position at church as part of our personnel team and then some other roles there, where when he transitioned, I was in a position to really help he and his wife and do some things. So it kind of came full circle.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do understand. I mean, John Wood at Cedar Springs for 7 years in a pivotal time in my life, I would say, and John, I mean, I'm sure, maybe if he saw me, he would know who I am. I sat up front, so he would always say hi and stuff like that, but I've never spent 2 minutes with him, but he's profoundly influenced me.
Absolutely.
Profoundly influenced me.
Yeah,
so
we all be like that. When there's people that say, hey, you didn't know me, but I was looking at you.
No.
That's why it's important that
Big deal, yeah.
Yeah, that we are cautious with what we do and what we say.
It's good. Who is Wes Evans?
Wes and Terry Delaney, both of those guys. And I go back to that. God puts people in your life for seasons, and for the last 7, 8, 10 years. Wes was our youth pastor at Concord, and Jamie and I both worked with youth for 25 years. Okay. And we got to know Wes when he first came there. But now Wes, through a series of events at our church, has become is a business guy now. And so he and I have really had a discipleship relationship where faith and work and understanding just the whole idea of marketplace Christianity, and that he has just as much an opportunity to be a pastor in his day-to-day work as he ever did reporting to an office in a church building. And so he and I have grown in that relationship, and I learned so much from him. Wes is 40 years old, but he's wise like a much older person, and so I love that guy. The other guy that's in that little group is Terry Delaney. He's one of my buddies, and Terry is I say he's a big wig. I don't even know his title. He's in sales and marketing for Bush Brothers here in town. Yeah. And Terry and Wes and I just have you have guys like that in your life where we're constantly praying for each other, texting each other. They know when something big's happening. Yeah. They know what's ahead for the week. They know the struggles of what's going on in your family and all those kind of things. And so those are guys. Back in maybe in the 90s we called them accountability partners or something. But those two guys are my go-to guys.
That's awesome.
We communicate every week. We're all with some other people in a small group and things like that. Yeah.
What about your in-laws? It sounds
like my mother and father-in-law were just. Jamie was the only child. They literally adopted me when we got married, and so they lived in Chattanooga, just salt of the earth. My father-in-law was a blue-collar guy, just didn't say a whole lot, but when he did, it was important. Oh yeah, they loved our grandchildren. My wife was still working; they were young. They would come to town and keep our kids, and just they were just salt of the earth folks, and they loved me You know, just like I was their son.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, are any of hers or your parents? Are they all? You said your
My
mom.
dad
You
is
said your
still
mom
alive.
passed
Yeah,
away.
we had 15 months. We lost 3 parents.
Oh wow.
Yeah, her dad, then
Jeez.
my mom, then her mom,
Oh, man.
all within just a little over a year. That was
Wow.
about 3 years ago. My dad's still alive. My sister lives in Nashville, and God bless her. She goes to my dad's house 3 days a week, takes him out, drives him
That's
around.
awesome. How old is he?
Go to the store. He's just turned 85.
That's awesome.
And I don't know what I'd do without her.
Yeah.
I try to get down there as much as I can, but she's a saint.
That's cool. That's awesome. And then I want to hear about building a plane because of Robert. I don't know how to say that. This high school
the
teacher.
building. Yeah. So yeah, Dr. Meadow. So what I loved planes. I always thought I wanted to be a pilot. I had horrible eyesight.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they convinced you that if you wear glasses, you're just not going to be.
Yeah.
So I always loved planes. Even when I was a little kid, my dad would buy me the little balsa wood planes, and we would make all the.
I bought some of those recently. You can still buy them.
Can you?
They're super fun.
I love them. I love, and so I was just a plane. We'd go to air shows. I mean, I just loved everything about planes. So when I was a junior in high school, I had instead of physics, we had in our school was, I guess it had some really nice programs, maybe different than there was a comprehensive high school is what they called it back then. And so I took this aeronautics class. It was all about, and the guy that taught it was a retired Air Force guy. And so we learned everything, just
this guy.
Dr. Meadow, and aeronautical stuff, and some of it was physics and weather, all different kinds. It was just really interesting. And so we were talking to him one day, and he was like, how do you get a pilot's license? Where could we go and fly? My buddies and I used to go to Eagleville, Tennessee, and fly gliders. For $12, they take you up, and they called it the lead sled. And if you've seen the big gliders with like the 30-foot wing, they pull you behind the plane. So for $12, we'd go, and we thought that we were fighter pilots. Well, so he said, well, I've got some plans for a plane, and he gave them to me. And a friend of mine, his name was Guy Hart, and we'd already tried to build this little hang glider thing. And we made it out of aluminum crutches. It was a delta wing, a triangle thing. And his brother jumped off the corner of their 2-story house, and it folded a cheap chair, and it broke his arm.
Oh my gosh!
So his mom said, "Look, if y'all are going to do this flying, get your act together."
A real plane.
So this thing had 14-foot wings, so it's 28 feet wide.
Wow.
And it had about a 16-foot empennage, all the fuselage, and it looked just like a plane, except it was a biplane, and it was 1-inch furring strips, and then all the spars and the wings were made out of we found bamboo. And so one night, I still remember this. One night at their house, we built a fire and stayed up all night. And we had this form that we had cut out of a 2x10. And we would lash the bamboo on it. We'd heat it over the fire until it made the proper thing. And so we had like 30 of these spars. And we put this thing together, and it was covered in like 8mm plastic. And we took it out to Percy Warner Park, and we'd fly it out there. And it was, just think like, kind of like a hang glider, but not a hang glider, but this plane that you stood in the middle, right? You stood in the middle, and then we'd start running. We'd have somebody on the tail, somebody on each wing. We'd start running, and it would just, it would start lifting, come under your arms. And next thing you know, you're off the ground, and it would probably get. I think the highest we ever got it was maybe 10 or 12 feet.
That's incredible.
But it was awesome.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. So then we, my buddy Guy, he wiped out. And one of the U-bolts went in his knee, and he got this. And so his mom, we were sidelined.
That was the end of your flying career.
They had this giant Econoline van or something, because he had a big family, and we could get all the parts in it. And she forbid us to use the van. That was it. So we flew it about 5 or 6 times.
I'm surprised you've never in all that
I've
you've
always
done
had an
decided to
interest.
get
I know.
a pilot's license or anything.
No, I've always had an interest.
Huh.
Jamie, she's so wonderful. She sent me one time to Huntsville, and I did this aviation challenge thing down there over the weekend where you fly jets. And then one time I went to Athens, Tennessee, and flew a Texan T6, which is an old radial engine plane that I got a I got to fly it and all that. So it's just
That's awesome.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah.
Think I'm too old?
No, it's still time.
Would you fly with me if I had a license?
Once you get your license, I will. I have a couple of friends that fly. I have, but this is your story, not mine. But my nephew, he actually got his pilot's license when he was in college.
Wow!
Just because he fell in love with flying,
Yeah.
and he's now a Delta pilot and a National Guard, flies C-5s.
Wow!
I actually was the first person he ever took up after he got his license. So literally, we got. I didn't know. No,
he didn't tell you
we
at
get in
the
the
time?
plane. I was like, "So how long?" And he goes, "Well, I just got my solo license last week or something."
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, who else?" No, you're the first one. And I was like, "Oh, this is cool." Because it only flies 120 miles an hour, so it's not that dangerous.
Yeah.
I was like, all right,
That's
whatever.
fun. It's on my list, honestly. You have those things in life,
yeah.
and getting my pilot's license is on there.
That's cool.
Maybe it's not too late.
I don't think I've ever known anybody whose childhood hero was Sir Edmund Hillary.
I love
love
backpacking.
it.
I loved climbing.
Really?
All right, so I used to joke. All my friends had Farrah Fawcett posters in their room.
Yeah,
Most people won't remember who that was.
I know, yeah.
I had the roof of the world. I had this poster that was about 12 inches tall and about 8 feet long, and it was all the highest peaks.
Yeah.
And it went all the way, Pakistan, Nepal. It went all the way down. You could look at everyone. There's K2, there's Everest, and so Jacques Cousteau. I love Jacques Cousteau.
I remember,
and Sir Edmund Hillary. I read a story about it. One of the coolest things, it goes back to one of those things where how things circle back in your life that just give you joy. About 10 years ago, I met Sir Edmund Hillary's son, Peter Hillary, and I was his kind of keeper for the day. He was speaking at an event. Todd Green here in town, with Green. Todd. Todd books a lot of speakers and all, and we had booked Peter through Todd's agency, and he was just an incredible guy. But here's where I'm going with that. On the 50th anniversary, I believe it was, the Discovery Channel or National Geographic recreated Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay's climb of Mount Everest with Peter Hillary and Tenzing Norgay's son.
I did see this.
So they recreated the climb 50 years later with the sons
Yeah.
of the two guys to the first summit. And so Peter Hillary had the sat phone that he called his dad from on the top of Mount Everest while being filmed by National Geographic. Saying, "Hey, Dad, we made it. We're here." All that kind of held it right there in that hand.
That's awesome. Wow.
Some people say, "Oh, that's kind of nerdy." It's like,
that's really cool.
What a cool thing!
Yeah.
And to meet him and to hear about his dad.
Yeah.
His dad's on the. He's on the currency of New Zealand. I mean, he's just a phenomenal guy.
That was so fun listening to Neil, and interviewing him was a treat. Can't wait for you to hear the second episode as we're going to get in a little bit further into things related to his career, his wife, his family, and all that he's learned as he's really walked this journey for over 30 years now. Stay tuned.